I will start by introducing our first speaker, who's Dorothea Lantz. She is with the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association. Dorothea is a rock star. I get to work with her personally sometimes, and she is first and foremost a rare disease mom. She understands what the challenges are like firsthand. Beyond that, she is Director of Community Engagement with the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association. So I will turn it over to Dorothea now. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I paid her for that introduction. I am Dorothea Lantz, and I am the Director of Community Engagement with the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association. And we are a 501c3 whose mission it is to enhance the quality of life for those living with PWS. And before I get started, I just want to recognize my son Hunter, who is this little guy over here in the hunter green pants. He is 6 years old with Prader-Willi syndrome. And the amazing moms that are with him are all also mothers of children with Prader-Willi syndrome that range in age from as young as 6 to well into their 30s, right, Elaine? Yes, thank you. So children and adults with PWS. So like many parents who find themselves tossed into the reality of raising a child with rare disease, I began searching for therapies when we began this journey. We wanted our son, my husband and I wanted our son to really grow into the best version of himself. We took everything that we were told by physicians, like a lot of other parents of rare diseases are told, and we basically chucked it and threw it out and decided that we were going to give our son the opportunity to choose his right path and show us how he wanted to live his life. That being said, the first thing I started to do was research. What is this rare disease? And immediately started researching what therapies might be available. I quickly learned that PWS is actually one of the lucky ones, and I say that with quotations because we actually have an approved treatment for PWS. But unfortunately, that treatment is growth hormone, and that does nothing to affect the hallmark symptom of PWS, which many of you know is hyperphagia. And it's otherwise the inability to ever feel full. But the kicker is that even though hyperphagia is the hallmark symptom of PWS, it is by far not the only symptom. We began to learn about things like excessive daytime sleepiness, severe rigidity, obsessive compulsive disorders, severe anxiousness, aggressive tendencies and behaviors, and so on and so forth. So although we're grateful that we have growth hormone so that our son has the ability to grow like his typical peers, the other aspects of PWS far outweighed the benefit of this one treatment, which was approved over 20 years ago. So my journey began as an advocate for families who had a loved one with PWS. And when I started working with PWSA USA, I began to find my voice as an advocate working for our community. And I quickly learned that our families who have a loved one with PWS are part of a much larger rare disease community with over 10,000 recognized rare diseases. Of course, you all know 95% of those have no treatment, no cure, 50% of those affect children, and 58% of those children never see their 5th birthday. So I felt fortunate knowing that our PWS community was abuzz with several biotechs that are working to develop therapies in the PWS space. And then the other shoe dropped, and that was COVID. So when COVID began, we had 3 pharma companies who had been having success in their drug trials to develop therapies to treat symptoms of PWS, and our community watched one fall, and the second fall, and the third fall, and the fourth literally hanging on by a thread. So we quickly realized that it wasn't just COVID affecting the drug trials, that it was policy that has been slowly chipping away at decades of progress in the rare disease space, which compounded the effects of conducting a rare disease trial in the middle of COVID. So PWSA began a campaign to educate the members of our community on policies such as the orphan drug tax credit and how in 1983, the orphan drug sparked innovation in the rare disease space by offering companies developing orphan drugs a 50% credit when their drug comes to market, among other incentives such as exclusivity. So in the year 2017, which was the year that my son was born, we literally saw that incentive cut in half. And the rare disease community was actually fortunate enough to have a handful of policymakers and stakeholders like some of you in this room just fight to salvage that last remaining 25%, which seems to be a battle that we have fought year after year after year since that original cut. So I spent my first year and a half at PWSA educating our community on different aspects surrounding ODTC and assisting the fight to not have any additional erosion. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but before it was passed in '83, there were less than 100 therapies to treat rare disease. And within several years, there were several hundred. So we know that these type of incentives have an effect on research and development for rare disease therapies. As a community that just endured the wrath of COVID, eliminating not just 3 pharmaceutical companies, but potential treatments for our population, it would have been nothing short of devastation if policymakers had allowed for any additional erosion of the ODTC. So we took a deep breath, and year after year, we are grateful for that continuing victory. But as a rare disease community, we also understand the cost and the risk that is associated with research and development for rare disease. Unfortunately, we've learned that the hard way that even the smallest shift in public policy can stifle innovation and leave our loved ones with no hope for treatments. So, although our community suffered several painful losses as a result of drug trials, we're fortunate to be able to weather the storm, unlike some of our other friends in the rare disease space. That being said, we were also a victim of data which was skewed as a result of self-care reported outcomes during the pandemic. We powered through and as a result worked to assist in drafting supporting legislation which would lend support to pharmaceutical companies that continued to work in the rare disease space during COVID with legislation such as it was formerly known as the Orphan Drug Mitigation Act, sponsored by Reps. Bacon and Gottheimer, which is now Leo's Law, which provides companies who have been able to continue working on rare disease drug development during COVID an additional 6 months of exclusivity, like a clawback when that drug comes to market. And it's based after existing policy in the pediatric space. We were excited to have our community be involved in that. And again, we do that, we start to breathe again, and we're focusing on PWS, research and development, and here comes the Inflation Reduction Act. So I don't want to be overly harsh here because there are a lot of very positive aspects to this legislation. Truly there are. As long as you are not living with, caring for, or developing a drug to treat a rare disease. Everyone here understands the cost associated with developing a drug to treat a rare disease, and the cost to our PWS community. We have become acutely aware of the cost to our community. By setting potential price controls in rare disease medication, the IRA could significantly impact the investment, the future investment in the rare disease development space. And while this type of regulation might be appropriate for the population at large and for drugs that are produced for the mass population, we in the rare disease space know the significant impact that this could have on research and development. But something that's even more personal to myself and to some of the people who have become my family in our PWS space is the rule which would limit orphan drugs to a single indication. We are fortunate right now in the PWS space that we have 6 potential therapies to treat PWS in the pipeline currently. We know how fortunate we are. Out of those 6 potential therapies, 3 of those are already approved to treat another indication. So by imposing a rule that mandates a single indication limit for orphan drugs, you're looking at one community out of the over 10,000 rare disease communities where 3 potential life-saving therapies would no longer be a viable option for orphan drug development. What does that mean in lay terms? So in the PWS world, we understand that there are many facets to this disease, like I mentioned earlier. We know that our population suffers from excessive sleepiness, severe anxiousness, hyperphagia, aggressive behaviors, etc. What we don't know is which behavior comes first and how the progression of one behavior might exacerbate a separate behavior. So does sleepiness cause anxiousness? Does hyperphagia cause sleepiness? Do all of the above cause aggressive, possibly self-harming or other harming type behaviors? It is not a stretch by any means when I refer to the PWS community as a community in dire need. In the last 7 days alone, our community has lost 3 individuals with PWS under the age of 30. 1 yesterday. This is the last week. These are individuals that we know for a fact would have benefited from the therapies that are being studied right now to treat PWS that are already approved for a separate indication. These are therapies that in the last week, if they were given to our population, could have saved 3 lives of young individuals, younger than me, in case you wanted to know. So I would ask, at what point will policy catch up to the rare disease reality? And at what point will policymakers realize that if 1 out of every 10 people has a rare disease, that this is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. When over 30 million Americans suffer from rare disease stops being rare. And when you stifle innovation in the rare disease community, you're not only slowing down research that helps the rare disease community, but you're slowing down research that can also help the majority of the population. For example, we know in the PWS space that many of the drugs that are being studied to treat aspects of PWS can be effective in treating other non-rare diseases. I won't go into examples, but you can ask me later. So like many children and adults in the rare disease space, our population not only needs help with research and development, but we're depending on it to provide a better, more typical quality of life for our PWS loved ones. And when as a parent, you can't leave the house, you can't take your kid to the grocery store, you have to decline every invitation to every party, to holiday events, to family events, just in order to keep your child in a food-safe environment. You realize that research and development is the only way that our families are going to have a better quality of life or a chance at anything that even appears normal. So I really hope that policymakers are not just listening to our plea for easier and more clearly defined pathways for orphan drug development, but it's my hope that they're actually listening. The rare disease community cannot afford to just sit back and keep believing that policymakers are going to do the right thing. I'm here today with our group of PWS advocates. We have 17 individuals that have come from all over the country on their own, where most of our community cannot travel because they are stuck at home. And these individuals realize that what's going on right now in DC is so important to the future of development, not just for therapies to treat PWS, but for therapies in the entire rare disease space. So we are here continuing to make our voices heard, and not just for PWS, but for all rare diseases. And we really hope that they're actually listening. And with that, I will leave you.